Hey guys, welcome back. So now we're getting back into our talks on the Hulk, and at this point, after Smastronaut and Banner of War, Donny Cates and Ryan Ottley are now taking us to Hulk Planet. But before we get into this one, I do want to say that a number of you guys have reached out to me over the past few weeks telling me that you've seen that you were unsubbed, and I'm not sure what that is, but I wanted to tell everybody else just to check, just to make sure. And also, there's been some bots in the comments doing some fugazi giveaway thing, and that's not me either. So don't click on that, it's just a whole bunch of scammers. But aside from that, if you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week, and apparently that might be something you may need to check on regularly. But in addition, don't forget to hit the bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so for this one, we jump back in not too long after the conclusion of Banner of War, where we had seen the Starship Hulk take off and leave Asgard, because both Thor and Banner both knew that even with them settling their differences, that the Hulk just couldn't go back to Earth. So instead, this resulted in Banner flying off into the reaches of far space, which is where we pick up with him now. But when we do find him, he's in a very peculiar kind of situation, because at this time when we pick up with Banner, he's subjected himself to a requirement of having to do 2 hours of therapy at least every day, which also takes place in his mindscape, and it's being given by a program that's been designed to emulate the therapy sessions of Doc Samson. And with these therapy sessions being held in his mindscape, they can get pretty bizarre and painful, because whatever Bruce feels here, it feels real to him. But nonetheless, Bruce has to do these for 2 hours every day, because if he doesn't, he'll be locked out of the Starship Hulk. But with us jumping into this session, we find that Doc Samson has asked Bruce about his childhood, and he's asked him to focus on one good thing. And it takes Bruce a while to calm his mind down, but when he does, the first thing that comes to mind is Logan. And no, it's not the Logan that you probably think it is, because Samson said one good thing, you know, peaceful thoughts. And for Bruce, this actually causes him to think of a friend he had when he was a kid named Logan James Gidley, who at the time young Bruce would just call LJ. And as Bruce thinks back, he remembers LJ to be a funny kid who loved science and comic books, but also Bruce describes LJ as someone who saved his life. And we're shown some examples like with the two of them running the bus home from school, but with Bruce's stop coming first and the bus driver just yelling at him because he doesn't want to get off. But young Bruce didn't want to get off, of course, because he doesn't want to go home to Brian Banner. And with how this is done, it's a really touching moment, because Logan gets up and he tells the bus driver that Bruce is staying with him and his folks for the weekend. And it's like in this moment where you see the bus driver looking at Bruce and he's reading the situation, then he's like, oh yeah, I forgot. That's right. Oh, I remember now, I remember. And it's kind of like, man, wow, the feels. But for Bruce, with him thinking back about LJ, he expresses to Digital Doc Samson how LJ had given Bruce and shown Bruce something that he hadn't experienced before. And with him inviting Bruce to his home, for the first time in Bruce's life, he felt safe, which says a lot about the home he grew up in. But even with Bruce thinking back about LJ, this then causes him to think about what he didn't have at home, which then caused Bruce to start thinking about how bad he had it at home. And with him thinking about this, he sees his father, Brian Banner, show up at LJ's home, to where then Brian Banner starts to take on the appearance of the Titan Hulk. But it's right here where the 2-hour session ends. And NPC Doc Samson asks Bruce, how's he feel? And in response, Bruce is like, you're overpriced. And it's funny that Bruce says that because this Samson isn't real. So I imagine the next time that Bruce sees the real Samson, the first thing he'll probably say to him is, man, your price is way too high. You need to cut it. Because it's almost like Bruce can feel the expense, even in a simulation. But as Banner leaves, Samson asks him whatever happened to his friend Logan. In response, Bruce says that he doesn't know, because they both grew up, Bruce became a green monster, and somewhere along the way they lost touch. But Bruce has always thought about this as a good thing, because he believes that Logan is the one person that he hasn't hurt. And for Bruce, that's why Logan is a happy memory. But it's at this point, after the therapy session is ended, where we find Bruce make his way to the captain's chair. And it's here where we now discover the next update that Bruce has done to the Starship Hulk. Because at this point, he has now split his own consciousness into a crew of multiple personality mental constructs, which now have allowed him to operate the ship at its max potential. And like with seeing this, I get it. It makes sense, because from the time that Bruce decided to turn the Hulk into a starship, and the whole Smastronaut thing jumped off, which again Bruce had did after the incident in El Paso, in order to take control of the Hulk and stay in control. But like we'd seen when Bruce stepping up the measures and finding a new way to put the Hulk on a leash, so to speak, it's only pushed the Hulk to the next level, to where now we got the issue of the Titan Hulk, who really is just a product of Bruce trying to fix himself or fix the Hulk. But just as a reminder, even with us seeing a glimpse of the Titan Hulk within Bruce's therapy session, I don't believe that this is the Titan Hulk stepping in with Bruce's mindscape, but rather it's like we're being shown through Bruce's therapy that Bruce is peeling back the layers and he's starting to figure out where the Titan Hulk came from. And that's what I believe is going on here, because from what we were shown, if you guys remember, at the conclusion of Banner of War, we had kind of got the tease that the Titan Hulk was still in Asgard, so if I had to guess, that's probably something we're not going to see for a while. But with us getting back to the Hulk series, I am glad to see that Bruce is at least trying something different rather than just going back to the exact same methods that had caused him to lose control. Even though these new methods might not be too much better, but rather I'm just glad that he didn't go back to the exact same place that we had seen him when all this started. But it's here we find that a little over 48 hours ago, the Starship Hulk had intercepted a code signal beaming from a distant planet beyond the astral membranes that separate our multiverse, which was riding on a beam of gamma. And with seeing this, Banner put his divided subconscious to work for them to collectively figure it out. But this then led them to a planet with no topography and just completely smooth like a marble, because whatever mountains or ridges that the planet previously had, they had been completely pulverized to the point of where the debris just shot up into orbit and created multiple rings around the planet. But also with this world showing signs of intelligence, with spires and casinos that have been erected by hand, as well as a swimming pool that you can see from space. But the mysteries of this world had piqued Bruce's curiosity, so of course he had to go down there and check it out for himself. But even with him going down there and checking it out, he's still a bit cautious, because who knows what he's going to run into down here. But as soon as he lands, he gets the indication that multiple life forms are approaching, and Bruce asks if they're hostile, and the computer just responds, unknown. And for Bruce, it's like he can hear them, but he can't tell where they're coming from. And for that reason, he starts to get ready to open fire. But just before he does, he then looks and he sees the huge city megastructure that him and his crew had observed from space, with the multiple spires and centers of commerce and leisure, which one of his crew members had described as casinos. But also with Bruce looking at this place, out front and center, he sees a monument of himself, of the Hulk, which right there really has him kind of like, okay, like what's really going on here? But with Bruce and pretty much his whole entire crew distracted, it's here where we then find that the multiple life forms that were approaching, they've made their way here. But of course, by the time that Bruce and the others see him, they're already on top of him. And it gets pretty nasty, like pretty quick, but at no point does it seem like that this is something that the Hulk can't handle. The Starship Hulk at that. But in the middle of the Hulk fighting off these random gamma mutates, it's here where Bruce is then met by the arrival of a woman by the name of Monolith. And when she gets there, she calls him Bruce Banner, which is interesting, being that Bruce just got here, or at least that's what Bruce thinks at the moment. But with Monolith arriving here, she introduces herself to Bruce and she tells him not to be afraid, but rather, welcome home. But just after this, we jump over to the next day, to Bruce's next therapy session. And for this one, it takes him back to his childhood, when he was 5 years old on the day that his father had murdered his mother. But while he's at the precinct, waiting for his aunt to come pick him up, he remembers a moment when one of the officers was offering him some hot chocolate, but it was at this time when the younger Bruce had closed his eyes and reached his hand out while thinking back on a specific memory with his mother. Because as a kid, Bruce remembered that everyone used to tell him that he was weak. His father, other kids at school, but for Bruce, it's during this therapy session when he thinks back on his childhood and he remembers what his mother told him as a kid that really helped him with that. Because at the time, Bruce's mother told him that she may not know as much about science as Bruce and his father, but she then goes on to ask Bruce, what's the most powerful thing in the universe? So powerful that no one could go near it because it's strong, not even the astronauts. And when Bruce answers, he says, the sun? And his mother Rebecca tells him yes. And she goes on to tell Bruce that the sun is so powerful that its light gives us all the plants and the trees, and it gives us all warmth so we can grow. And it comes from millions and millions of miles away. And in response at the time, young Bruce was like 93 million miles. Because like we talked about before, young Bruce, he's a genius. Which is also why his father thought that his son was a gamma mutated demon baby. But with Bruce's mother pointing this out to him, she was showing him that regardless of the sun being so powerful and its light traveling 93 million miles to Earth to get to that sidewalk, but even with that being the case, the sun couldn't get through little Bruce. And he remembers his mother telling him this to show him that he was strong. But then also in this therapy session, Bruce remembers again himself in the precinct, remembering this memory in a moment when he was trying to be strong, but this time he couldn't find his shadow. And he remembers at the time when his eyes were closed, someone put their hand on his shoulder and they told him that no one could hurt him. But Bruce remembers in that moment that he knew it was a lie, that the hurt was always going to be there. And as the session ends, we find that for Bruce, later he found his shadow again, only to find out that it wasn't his shadow. Not anymore, because it was him. He had broken the sun, and Bruce would always be in his shadow. And it's crazy because the Breaker of Worlds is always carrying the issues of the Breaker of Suns. Double entendre. It's crazy. But then it's here where Monolith comes out to speak to Bruce, and he asks her, like, what exactly is all of this? And it's here where she tells him that long ago this planet was inhospitable, devoid of life, empty and hostile. But then there was light, which is where all these Hulks had dropped in onto this planet after being rejected from another because they were abominations, imperfect, primitive, and savage. And she goes on to tell Bruce that when these abominations got here, they raged, they fought each other, and they broke mountains in the process, which is a huge part of what turned this world into what Bruce sees it as today. Because after many years of battling and bloodshed, this scorched world started to absorb the gamma radiation from these dead bodies, from their blood soaking into the world. And alongside of this, a new atmosphere was born of mountains that had been blasted into ash, which over time had then started to cool this world and shield it from their gamma sun. Which right there kind of makes me think that Bruce may get something out of this in therapy, with the whole shadow and suns analogy going on here. But then after saying this, Monolith then goes on to tell Bruce that with these changes, the people of this world then started to grow. The pulsing constant pressure of their fists slowly started to change and alter their orbit. The cycle of life, death, and rebirth soaked the ground below them in gamma radiation. What was blood became soil, which became food, which then rose into the sky on their screams and terraformed an entire planet made just for them. But then later, their sun exploded, and not so much in the case of the sun just being destroyed, but more so like a surge of energy that showered this planet with an insane amount of gamma radiation. But when this explosion happened, in that light, there was a voice, a name, and when they looked up, they saw him. And this caused the people of this planet to be grateful, because he saved them. He changed them, because he had soaked their world in a hurricane of gamma that was filled with information, science, and evolution, of which these people have since put to use, and as Monolith would describe, this has made them more like him. But after Monolith explains all of this to Bruce, she then takes him to her scientists, and they run a number of tests on him, as well as examinations. But with them doing this, at one point they were testing what he could lift, and when he told them that it was heavy, they didn't even know what heavy meant. And even when Bruce tried to explain it to Monolith, telling her like, yeah, well, heavy is when something's difficult to lift. And with him saying that, Monolith was still like, I don't understand. To where then Bruce was just like, ha, no, yeah, okay. Of course y'all don't understand. It's the planet of the gains over here. But then it's from here where Bruce is having a conversation with Monolith, and from what she's told him, he's more or less put together how this whole world came about. And he lets her know that the first of her kind that landed on this planet, they came from a world that he had been to before, where another version of himself had sent them all here in an attempt to save them. And that alternate version of himself being none other than the Dr. Bruce Banner that we were introduced to in issue 2 from Earth 122. But even with Bruce bringing this up, he also knows how his face had appeared to the people of this world many years ago when their sun had exploded. And it's here where he explains to Monolith that what they had seen at the time had been a bomb from the people of Earth 122. And when I say people, I mean more so President Thunderbolt Ross of Earth 122, when he had tried to kill Dr. Banner and Captain Banner with one of his gamma bombs. But like we'd seen back in issue 6, when Bruce opened up a portal to absorb the blast and radiation, it had ended up happening here, which once again is why the people of this world had seen his face when their sun exploded. And Bruce goes on to explain that this must have advanced their mutation and carried all the other Banner's scientific data and computations in that moment. And on top of this, Bruce also figured out that with time moving different here because of this world's orbit, that's why to him that blast had just happened a week ago. And while Bruce is explaining this and the two of them are just walking and talking, when Bruce mentions the part about the bomb, he then gets ready to tell her about Banner of War, but then Monolith cuts in and she's like, oh yes, you fought Hammer Satan. He tried to stop you, so you tore him in half and made rivers with his blood, which isn't exactly how God of Hammers went down. I mean, I recall it going a little bit different, but with hearing this, Bruce, he doesn't go back and forth about it. He just kind of like, yeah, sure, I killed Hammer Satan. But then also it's here where Bruce gets back to the whole explosion thing, and he tells Monolith about how he's sorry and he didn't know that the explosion would do what it did to this world, let alone the fact that all these people were here. And Bruce tells Monolith that he wants to do what he can to help. But as they make their way back outside, Monolith tells Bruce that heaven doesn't need help. Because again, the people of this world, they practically worship Bruce, or really more so the Hulk, but then again, Bruce Almighty ain't too bad of a name. But of course, I know it's already taken. But as they step outside, one of the natives who goes by the name Pave, he ever so humbly asks Bruce if he would play against him in their annual Godball season, which is one of their traditions from the old days that they've held on to, which celebrates their horrid and violent past. And with hearing this, Bruce is like, he doesn't want to hurt anyone, but then Monolith assures him that he can't, which right there lets Bruce know that this ball's gonna be serious. But as Bruce walks away with Pave and the others, it's here we see that Monolith gets some information back from one of her scientists who we had seen testing Bruce earlier. And it's here that we find with these results and these scans that her scientist lets her know that Bruce Banner is going to die. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below to where you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.